All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Dan Weitzer. I am the co-founder of BPHL and also a senior innovation consultant at Independence Blue Cross. And today, I'm so excited because we have Meg DeBrito, director from Greensboro Farms, and they are super cool, super innovative. And it's so interesting to me, and I can't wait to have this discussion. So thank you so much, Meg, for being on today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This is great.
Awesome. So let's just start off by explaining to everyone what Greensgrow Farms is.
Yeah, so Greensboro Farms is a 23-year-old nonprofit urban farm and garden supply that's in the density of the city, in the urban core. We have a location in Kensington and West Philadelphia, and our location in Kensington is almost an acre. We have 3 high tunnels that are raised beds, about 7,000 square feet of growing production space, and a heated 3-bay greenhouse on site. We also take care of a flock of chickens, our mascot Ping, who's a pig, and I'm sorry, Ping is our duck, and Milkshake, who is truly our mascot and our pig. So we have community of animals on site. We grow food and flowers, and we engage the neighborhood in helping sort of resource their gardens.
That's amazing. It's so cool, and I'm so interested with how it works. So can you explain like where the idea for an urban farm came from and how that whole process actually works in a city?
Right. So, the whole idea of urban farm is really predates the agrarian archetype. Like hunter-gatherers started to live in a civic situation, and as they started trading seeds and tools and stuff like that is when domestication of animals and seeds started to really produce the agrarian archetype outside of the village. So it's a really old form, but Greensgrow and this sort of industrialized form of urban ag came out of post-war suburbanization and the fall of U.S. manufacturing. And the idea for sort of reclaiming land in this way came in the mid-90s. Mary Seton Corboy and Tom Sarajuk, who were both chefs downtown, were sort of thinking about how they could better supply their customers with high-end, beautiful greens that they didn't have to order from halfway across the country. And that timeline of their thought process sort of intersected with what was happening in cities where these neighborhoods were being forgotten by a global economy, and these large tracts of land were sitting vacant and could be reclaimed for new use. And so Mary and Tom really steamrolled this whole new process forward. Originally, they used the site growing hydroponic greens. So that looked like a lot of PVC tubing and gutters and things like that, and sort of nutrient-dense water running through it, 20,000 lettuce starts sticking out of white tubes on a site in North Philadelphia. And of course, the neighbors are like, what is going on here? It's such a new form that they become curious and interested. And so the model that they originally set up, where they were just supplying restaurants with greens, then starts expanding into a truer, deeper neighborhood project, which is the heart of urban ag, being able to center communities around their food source and grow skills.
That's amazing. And I want to let everyone know that's watching, if you have any questions while we're talking for Meg, definitely leave them in the comments, and we'll hopefully get to them as we're having the discussion. So, because I'm sure people will have lots of questions about how this works and what they can do. Yeah, definitely, because it's amazing. So, going off of the community aspect, I have 2 questions related to that. So one, obviously everyone's been affected by COVID-19 in some way. So how has your business been affected by it? And in that community sense, how have you, a lot of your stuff are events and demonstrations and having people learn things. How have you kind of adjusted for that as well?
Yeah. So, the initial question of just adjusting to COVID-19, and we, in the early days, we're a farm, so we are an essential business, but it was unclear what we could continue to sell and what we couldn't. Yeah. I come from a design background, so I felt like I had quick resources to grab from to sort of build an online terminal. I just threw it up on our website, and just to see how we could continue to resource people. I was really, as a gardener, I felt like during this crisis, plants and food, and also just the act of gardening, was going to be a deeper need in the community. And so I was looking really early on to how to continue to maintain our corridor for resource, and also our connections to the larger supply chain. I mean, we're connected to both food and plant vendors regionally, and that's a huge thing, to be able to bring that type of stuff into the city and get it into people's households above and beyond what we grow. So really early on, we started shifting to an online platform. We had to shutter for about a week to kind of make that operational move, and then we opened back up. We're only earning about a third of our projected revenue this way. So it's still a big impact, and we're a little unsure how it's going to play out over the course of the year, and yet grateful that it gives us enough cash flow that we can continue to sort of keep ourselves open and keep ourselves innovating to hopefully stave off the impact. We are 80% of our operating budget to do things like events and education comes from those sales. So right now we're sort of looking at new innovative models for how we bring some of our workshops and education online. And we're looking to do that as a hub and an aggregator of sort of niche growers and ecologists and people in the area that might want, a larger platform to continue to deliver education. We're thinking through what it would look like to move our farm dinner into some sort of online form with chefs, and still just sort of like having those conversations with chefs in the area. And we just started to kick off a partnership with Studio Ludo, who is they're a nonprofit designer in Philadelphia working on play spaces for kids. And we have a goal and mission to educate kids and raise some funding last year around this. And so we're going to shift to delivering play packs and offering play packs within the neighborhoods. So both for donation and hopefully we'll get some out there for free to people who can sort of engage their kids in ecology and plants and things like that in their backyards or on their streets and things like. And then the last piece that's really interesting is so many people are circling the farm. So we have this new relationship to how we demonstrate native plants, urban growing, urban food, right at the edge of our farm. And as a designer, I'm really interested in this sort of inversion of how we physically operate.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's so interesting because, when there's a constraint like what we have right now, people are forced to kind of think differently and break out and bring those different aspects of their lives in, which it seems like you are doing and your team's doing, which is absolutely amazing. You're doing things that are different that maybe you never thought that you'd be doing before, but it might be a new way of doing something,
Yeah. I think it's integral to how we function. The form of agriculture in a city, it like loses both predetermined factors. It's not like what ag looks like in the rural setting, and then you're like walking down the street and you're assuming buildings and you're like, whoa, a full city block of plants and garden and food. So I think that we're used to, throughout the seasons, throughout the year, really shifting a lot. And also our customer base and our neighbors are used to that shift along with us. So while there's constraints in terms of how we can operate, we also have the flexibility or knowledge that we are a flexible type of business and that people appreciate that in us. And so it gives us maybe more energy to be able to quickly pivot.
Yeah. And you had mentioned this earlier, and I actually saw an article. I read an article about you building your e-commerce site. And you're like, I'd never done this before, but like, let's do it. And I think that, echoes, what a lot of people are doing, for not being scared. Like, we're just going to try that. Can you give any advice to people that are like maybe a little bit nervous about, what's going to happen? How do they think differently? How do they think more creatively? Because like it seems like, you just jump right in. You're like, we're going to figure out how to do this.
Right. Yeah. I think, a piece of advice is really to be able to accept failure. I mean, the first iteration of it, I was like ripping my hair out, like, oh God, we can't deliver these. Oh no, like people are angry, over the course of my life and as the type of work that I've done. And then also stepping into this role at Greensboro, I've really like accepted that there are like new ideas that will immediately click and new ideas that won't. Yeah. And that I've just seen the feedback loop that when I like push at something hard enough, I can get it to work. And I think that there's a lot of capacity out there to accept change right now in our general public. And so I think offering ourselves vulnerably to people and saying like, I might fail at this, but I'm trying, and I'm trying to reorganize myself to support us all as a community. Those are some places to stand in making those changes. And then I've gotten just so much out of reaching out for help, saying to our POS processor, like, what can you do for me? This is what I need. Like, what are your options? And, in the early weeks, that was a lot of it, of just like connecting with different vendors that we had and trying to figure out, the middle ground.
That's great. And do you think that because your model already is creative and innovative, that it was easier for you to pivot to doing something different?
Yeah, totally. I mean, Mary built Greensgrow as a space for innovative entrepreneurship. As many people know, farming is a pretty low margin enterprise in many cases, and most of our large-scale farms are actually subsidized because of that. And Mary and Greensboro never really had that sort of large-scale commodity crop subsidization to offset. And so new forms were always a way to push Greensboro forward. And that legacy has left us a lot of tools on site and within our staff and within our community to continue to be able to innovate and continue to be able to almost use inspiration as the driving force.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely amazing. We have a question from Michelle, and she says, do you think having those kinds of animals in an urban setting helps educate kids and build empathy?
Yeah, so I do. I think that it helps create connection in terms of what you're talking about, building empathy. We have a lot of people who come to bring their kids to look at the animals, feed the animals on a daily basis. I think that we can see the relationship on site between bugs and insects and plants and laying hens. And it not only builds empathy with us and the animals, but us in a larger environment that we exist within sort of a whole system.
True. No, definitely. So you've mentioned this before too, about being local, and a lot of what you're talking about is local and helping the community. Why is it so important for people to buy local? Because I don't think people really realize the impact that it has. So can you explain, like, why is it so important for people to buy locally?
Yeah, I think there's two main issues here. One is sort of what is largely marketed, which is that when you buy locally, your carbon footprint or your impact on sort of our pollution-based world goes down. And that's definitely true. And, as we have seen with, people driving less and people moving around less, that like those choices make very quick impact. So more people buying locally actually does make that shift that dial. But the other, I think, even more important reason is relational. So when we buy local, we build a stronger relational economy around food in our communities. And then we are also building sort of a reciprocation with the farmers that are growing that food. And when we build that type of relational reciprocation with our farmers and with our food system, we have some level of agency to want to fund better land practices, or, we can pay more, and not everybody can pay more, but we can look for solutions to actually make sure that we're caring for our land in better ways. And ultimately, I think when we have to justify more locally what it looks like, what bad land practices in agriculture look like, we feel it in a deeper way. And so I think that really seeding our buying practices locally, is as much about reducing pollution as it is about building relational sort of agency and accountability in our communities around food.
And I think also, like, for me at least, when I'm buying locally, I know where it came from. Like, you can see where it actually came from. And I think a lot of that for me is like, you don't know where this apple or this basil or whatever came from. You don't know what the process was in order for it to get there. And I just think for me at least, and I'm sure for other people, being able to see like it was right here and I picked it up and now I'm going to use it. Like that's comforting, I would say.
Totally. I think it's hugely comforting, and because it speaks to possibility, right? Like it speaks to like any piece of land around us has the possibility to nourish me.
Yeah.
And I think that's also, it's a marker for our children and for like the next generation to be able to see, these local resources or where their food comes from. And that's shifted hugely, like even in our lifetimes, thinking about the young people in our lives having that direct relationship. And when I was growing up, it was like the Grand Union. You don't know what the supermarket is, but it was Jersey.
Well, I especially for what you guys are doing, it really shows. I think people forget that, and I guess again, I'm assuming, but like when you look at a city, you're seeing it as like these tall buildings, the concrete, the roads, and I think people forget that that's land. Like that is something that things could be grown on technically. And I think it's awesome to have that. I don't know, juxtaposition of like there's a city, but then you're planting something, you're growing something. Like every piece of land can happen on. Right. I think that's so cool to see. Like I think it's amazing. Yeah,
it is. It's cool to see, but it's such a cool experience. Like because it's a sensual experience, and buildings can be like, it's usually like the light or space or air within buildings that create the sensuality of it, but like there's physical smells and sounds and stuff that comes out of seeing that land change and that land use change. And and I think to your point about like it's a city but it was something else before and it's just land, like, in Philadelphia the Lenni Lenape tribes were like cultivating the land below our feet, and so to our urban gardens and our urban spaces that are growing things can remind us that there's been so much history in the landscapes that we inhabit.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So in terms of farming, have you seen, or what do you think, like what creative solutions and innovations will come from this time period that we're currently in?
Yeah. I think one of the things that will have to happen, one of the things that it is happening in farming right now is looking at really preserving our soil. We've degraded our soil systems over time, and we are losing topsoil at a really rapid rate, and we need that soil to create healthy food for ourselves. So I think that all along the farming chain, whether it be very conventional farmers to the most organic practices, people are seeing that and holding that up. And because in urban scenarios, there was never really an ability to use tractors in the same way, and maybe there wasn't as much keenness to leave the land brown and fallow and open because of the density and experience of small spaces. So I think that the no-till movement and sort of soil health movement will continue to increase during this time, because the general public is starting to really turn their head and be like, oh, our food and our farming practices are the base of our ability to nourish ourselves. And in these times when we don't, we're not in the sort of fast-paced world of work that we were in before or whatever else, that will become more central to people's reality and presence. And so I think that there'll be more initiative and interest. So I think that's a big practice that will change, and we've already seen that's starting to change. And I also think we are seeing ourselves as interconnected, sort of what I was talking about earlier in terms of empathy, but it's larger than just empathy. Our food is pollinated by certain insects that live in certain specifically native plants, and sometimes the cultivar I choose won't feed that insect that then feeds the eggplant or pollinates the eggplant that feeds me. And so not only are we as a human society much more integral and interconnected than we think about on a daily basis, but in terms of an ecological society, we're more connected. And we'll see that because of our awareness and relationship to what virus and disease does intra-species.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, we've already really seen like the plants and animals have taken over in certain cities where people aren't out as much and they've gone back to, being in this certain lake or animals have populated another area or plants have been growing on the side of a building. Like it's amazing to see that we all are connected and this still is, the earth and no matter what happens, plants are going to come and we need to keep that stability between there. So I've been watching a lot of Lion King because my daughter's too. A Circle of Life,
It's all about the circle of life.
All about it. As you're talking, I'm like hearing, Simba talking in my head, or Mufasa or whatever.
That's our new farm animal is Simba.
So yeah. Oh man. So, and I want to reiterate to everyone, if you have questions, feel free to mention them in the comments. And we'll hopefully get to them as we're talking. So let's transition to another side. So for people that are at home right now, how can they start to learn how to grow, their own little small gardens? I mean, I tried to grow 2 years ago. I tried to grow watermelon and pumpkin right next to each other, not realizing how much it would take over my little area. It was insane. It was absolutely nuts. So what tips can you give to people for starting small and how to, have like little own plants at their house?
Yeah. Well, one thing I can say is start cheap and try to isolate the particular plants or varieties that you're most interested in exploring. Farming and growing and gardening, it's an iterative exploration. And kind of to my point earlier, it doesn't have to be like your best season every season. Like some seasons will be about learning pest pressure, and other seasons will be about like learning how to properly feed your tomatoes, and that is all going to change with seasonal conditions and rain conditions. And so I think one of the best places to start is just like invest with a flexibility. So one of the ways you can do that is maybe milk crates and cardboard and filling those with soil is what you're going to grow out of first, right? Like you don't have to go out and buy an expensive like bed or pot or system to start growing in. You can start growing in really basic scenarios. And then I think really setting up a schedule for yourself for when you're going to interact. And so much of growing plants is about looking at them and looking at them regularly and noticing change. And I think that's really helpful on a wellness level for all of us. And so even if you just start a garden as a wellness space for you, that is like a noble task, of just caring for the self outside of any food it will produce. And then on top of that, the last piece of advice I would say is really getting to know the flowering and blooming timelines, because you do want to feed your plants when they start to flower. So your tomatoes, your cucumbers, those types of things, they need a little bit of compost tea or other types of basic fertilizers, organic fertilizers. Fish emulsion can be great as sort of a little bit of a boost to them when they start to flower to help them produce fruit. And then really knowing your harvest schedule will help you actually make sure you get that fruit and the squirrels don't.
Yeah, yes, definitely. And it's great to hear that you don't, because I do feel like people think they have to have this large open space. It's like, no, you can have, like you said, you can have that milk crate, you can with cardboard, fill it with soil and start growing small. My grandfather had a large little garden at his house, and he used it as stress relief. Like he would go out there every day at a certain times. He would do everything. He would talk to them, and I think that's why his eggplant tasted so good, because he would like go out there and whisper to them. And he lived to 100. So I'm not saying that if you garden you'll live to 100, but it's possible. It's stress relief.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, there are actually a lot of publications coming out right now about like the neurological impacts of gardening and growing, and even just like engaging the soil and how that really does stimulate our brain patterns in new and different ways, and in useful ways for stress relief.
Definitely. And it's exciting. I mean, when you plant something and then you see, even if it's one tomato plant and all of a sudden you start to see it grow, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is the cool thing.
I'm a real innovator.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Grown a cucumber.
So we have some questions coming in. So growing produce in the city has certain challenges, like squirrels. Do you have any tried and true animal-friendly solutions for keeping squirrels and birds from eating your plants?
So some of the best methods I've used are bird netting or deer netting at the edge of the garden, and or even like setting up a sort of cage that allows me to net around tomatoes or other types of sort of the favorites of squirrels and other animals. And the other solution is mirrored tape. So you can get sort of like bird tape and you put it on a stake near your plants, and it will just like send light at rapid influxes, which will oftentimes scare a lot of pests away.
Okay.
Neem oil is a great non-toxic pesticide that has a smell to it, and so some pest pressure community. I mean, it's great for insects, but also like it will deter squirrels and small rodents from being as interested in your fruit.
Nice. No, that's great, because everyone has that problem at some point. Like, everyone has it.
You know, I think that squirrels all have their own personalities, and some of them are more creative than others. And so, you know, you have to kind of keep trying to figure out which squirrel you're dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. Someone else asked, in what ways can we as a community directly support Greensboro Farms during this time of uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, so right now, as I said earlier, you know, ordering plants is a huge it's what's supporting us right now. We don't have the ability to take in a ton of volunteers because of the scenario of social distancing. So, you know, we will need to use this model for a while. So sort of becoming comfortable with our model and helping us by purchasing plants is huge. We also will be opening up new opportunities for sort of donating and supporting some of our programs as we move to sort of online platforms for those programs. So just stay connected and look out for that as well. I think those are the, you know, really engaging with plants at a distance is a huge way to support us. We've packaged some of our plants into packs, basically. So an herb pack has 5 different herbs in it, and they'll mostly be culinary herbs. We've gotten a lot of feedback where people are like, I just want to pick out one specific herb. And my feedback there is, we can't do that because of our operations, but you could buy the pack and give some to your neighbors and be supporting us and supporting your community at the same time. So I think one of the greatest ways that people can support us is by recognizing that buying plants with us right now is supporting our programs. So even if you're not getting exactly what you want, like get more green things into the earth and help support us and help support your community by doing so.
Definitely. That's great. And try something new. Like, it might not be the herbs that you think you would like, but maybe you will. You never know.
Yeah, I'm hoping actually that people learn new things from the experience of buying sort of our plants at a distance packs. And it made me think through the idea that maybe a plant CSA would be of interest to people who are new to gardening, where we could actually curate their garden for them in a deeper way, and they're just getting like a regular pack to put in. Don't know where we'll go with that.
Amazing, man. Great. Yeah.
Speaking of like innovation on overdrive.
Yeah. Well, we only have a little bit of time left. So the last question I want to ask is, what's your biggest hope for the days after COVID-19?
Yeah, I hope as a community, we've learned our resilience together, and that we can not sort of plunge too quickly back into old processes and old habits. This liminal space between what was and what will be is the richest place for continued change. So I'm hoping that as we get back to our normal lives and as we connect with each other again, that a certain level of innovation and possibility and inspiration for a new future will stay with us.
Well, that is incredibly inspiring and the best way to end this. That was amazing. So Meg, thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it. What you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. And I hope everyone learned something new and will go support, buy the multi-pack and grow some new things, do some new things. So yeah, thank you so much for being on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for doing this. It's really cool to see so much innovation happening in Philadelphia.
Yeah, definitely. So everyone watching, we do these weekly. We'll have 2 new sessions next week. So definitely check those out. And yeah, we'll see you then. So thanks so much. See you, everyone.
Yeah.